A great day, Humanistas. How was your second week of indulging yourselves on the disciplines of anthropology, economics, and geography? Are you now bombarded with concepts and ideas with these disciplines? I hope you are still with our journey, eager to know more about social sciences. And this week's lesson is a continuation of our discussion on the different disciplines of social sciences, particularly history and linguistics, and comparing these various disciplines and illustrating the historical foundations and social context that led to the emergence of these disciplines, and also determine how history and linguistics can be used to address social concerns, and compare and contrast the social science disciplines according to their field of interest, areas of inquiry, and methods. So come now and let us begin our educational journey. In our previous discussion, we discussed and learned about the historical and social foundations of anthropology, economics, and geography. We were also educated about the concepts and ideas underlying these mentioned disciplines in the social sciences. Now, for this week, we are again to venture ourselves with other disciplines, particularly, as I said a while back, history and linguistics. And we are again to journey into the realm of the past and to know the medium of interaction that had been used for man to survive. But do we really know the meaning of history? Because we were really repeatedly asked about the definition or meaning of history. And we already hear so many times about the old dictum, history repeats itself. Okay? History repeats itself. But if we go deeper, knowing the concept of history, are we aware of this concept? Now, the word history came from the Greek word historia, which means finding out, inquiry, and or narrative. And in some interpretations, historia means the knowledge acquired by investigation. But a more specific definition has been given by American Historical Association, in which this association defines history as the never-ending process whereby people seek to understand the past and its meaning. History then, in many ways, is a way for us to understand ourselves and make sense of the world. It is not just about knowing the events that happened in the past, and after that, it's no more. But when we talk about history, according to the definition given by the American Historical Association, history is knowing really what happened in the past, but reflecting on it so that we can make sense of the world that we are living today. Will and Ariel Durant, the former a historian and the latter a researcher, presented how history could be an industry, okay, an art, and philosophy. Now, according to these two philosophers, okay, history as an industry means that a historian should discover the primary sources that describe past events and not simply rely on hearsay or unsubstantiated opinions. History as an art means the historian must analyze the facts that he or she obtained to be able to make sense out of the available data. And as a philosophy, the historian must provide a critical interpretation of the historical facts so that his or her target audience would grasp and understand the past events. So, in this work of Will and Ariel Duran, it is really said that history can become an industry, an art, and a philosophy. But what is important here is that we verify what really happened in the past so that we have an accurate understanding also of the event that existed or happened before, and to come out with reflection of this so that this will not happen again, or it can happen again if it is good for the society. Now, let us discuss about the development of history. Actually, before the invention of writing, we have what we call the prehistoric period. This period refers to the time when a system of writing was not yet invented to record the events that happened during that time, or to record history, which at that time was passed down from generation to generation through what we call oral tradition. Okay? Pasaling labi, pasaling wika, okay? Parang kwento dito, kwento doon, hanggang sa nagsalin-salin sa iba't ibang henerasyon. That was the method of knowing the events that happened or recording the events that happened during the past. But the invention of writing allowed the people to record events by inscribing them in stones, bones, tablets, and bronze. Therefore, these events can be learned by a multitude of people even far from the story's origin. Meaning to say that the earliest systems of writing were in the form of inscribing them in stones, okay, in tablets, bones, and bronze. And during the earliest period, the earliest systems of writing were in the form of cuneiform of Mesopotamia, if you are aware of that, diba? And in ancient Egypt, they have the hieroglyphics, and in ancient China, they have the logograms. Yan. Now, in ancient Egypt, written history started around the middle of the 3rd millennium before Christ. And the early Egyptians chronicled ancient Egyptian history by listing the names of kings and the rulers of Egypt. And with that, they were able to create what we call a logical system that allowed them to establish cycles or years. And that was the development of history or recording of history or events in ancient Egypt during that time. In ancient China, the studying and recording of history became more developed. Okay? It is thought that Confucius was the first to have studied and compiled Chinese history in his books or in the book Chunggyu, okay, which means Spring and Autumn Annals, and in the book Shujing, which means Classic of History. Yan. And history was used to propagate Chinese moral philosophy, which was closely linked to their political and social lives. And if you want to know more about the more detailed and longer historical study about ancient China, we can look into the contributions or historical study by Sima Qian, okay, in his work Shiji, okay, which means historical records, which covered a 2,500-year period of Chinese history. And because of this extensive work, okay, Sima Qian was regarded as the grand historian. Imagine, yung writings niya kasi, ba? It covered 2,500 year period of Chinese history. That's why he was regarded as the grand historian of China. Now, the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament is considered as an important historical writing in the West civilization, the same as the Chungku and Shujing are for the Chinese. Okay? And through a detailed genealogy, the Old Testament provides a creation story and a list of kings just like the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians. And in this Hebrew Bible, it also incorporates moral interpretations to historical accounts because it narrates stories about prophets and provides a deep insight into the social structure and political system of the Hebrew through laws and commandments. And the Old Testament also recounts how the Hebrews struggled and endured to live in their promised land. If you know the story, okay? Yan. In ancient Greece, logographers from the Greek word logos meaning story and grapho meaning to write were considered to be the first historians. And they wrote stories on the origins of peoples, places, towns, but in a unique prose style. Okay? And while they wrote stories based on oral traditions at that time, they added factual data to these stories, including geographic and cultural information. Yan. Now, Roman historiography is not surprisingly Greek in origins, as most of Greek cultures was imitated by the Romans. Okay? And one of the known writers of Roman historiography is in the name of Polybius. A Greek historian, okay, he was an instrumental in igniting Roman historiography as he wrote why Rome did not see fit to recount its historic achievements. Okay? And Polybius was also one of the first to have used the method of what we call comparative analysis in the study of history. So it is not a surprise, okay, for us that when we look into the history of Rome, okay, of ancient Rome, it is somewhat the same with that of ancient Greece. Okay? Because many of the traditions, cultures, and way of life of the people of the Romans were also copied from the life or way of life of the Greeks. Okay? Even the mythology, pa, somewhat they copied it with the Greek mythology. Now, in terms of religion, the early Christian concept of history was mirrored with apocalyptic expectations, for early Christians believed the world is about to end with the second coming of Jesus. So as such, their concept of history was simply the incarnation, death, resurrection, and second coming of Christ. That was the early Christian concept of history. Okay? In Islam, the Islamic conception of history relies on the Quran as it traces humanity's history from Adam to Muhammad, the prophet and founder of Islam. Islamic history also relied on what we call the hadith or the traditions and sayings that were said to have come directly from Muhammad. And the passing of these traditions and sayings being traced back to Muhammad himself gave the hadith consistency and legitimacy. And up to now, they also have this kind of tradition or passing of tradition. Okay? In the Renaissance period, history in Renaissance adhered more to the scientific Galileo rather than the philosopher Plato. Okay? And the study of history became more critical of how classical works were translated, passed down, and written over time. Okay? Hereby questioning the authenticity of sources and the obscurity which gradually accumulated over the original text. Okay. Now, philology, or the study of the original form of text, became popular during that period in order to augment the obscurities. Okay? The obscurities of the history, okay, of the earlier time. Now, therefore, the Renaissance was not simply a period of reminiscing classical Greek and Roman history or Greek and Roman past, but was a more inquisitive and scientific revisiting of such past. Because there is what we call the use of philology, okay, to really determine, okay, and validate that the original form of text came from an authentic author or an authentic writer, okay, during the earliest time or the earliest period. Yan. It's now time for us to know the fields of history. But prior to that, allow me to say that history pertains to the totality of occurrences in the past, mainly obtained from written records. Okay? May I repeat that? History pertains to the totality of occurrences in the past that were mainly obtained from written records. And some fields will be discussed here so that we will become aware of this field and let us know if we agree based on the different field that history is really a discipline of the social sciences. Okay? First field is what we call cultural history. Focuses on the study of belief systems, customs, social forms, political systems, material traits, and economic activities of a group or community, usually for the purpose of cross-comparison with others. Meaning to say, cultural history looks into the process of cultural development as well as the refinement of intellectual and artistic facts. Because it is through cultural history that we can really know, okay, and become more aware of the belief systems and customs and social activities that we have today, okay, by looking really what they have during the past. Okay? So it is a process of cultural development. Yan. Another field of history is social history. And it is concerned with the study of particular kinds of phenomena such as family and marriage, adolescence and mass media, human rights and inequality, industrialization and development, and work and leisure through the use of sociological theories and approaches. Meaning to say, when we talk about social history, it really studies the experience of the people in the society. Okay? The experiences like the way of life, okay, how they interact, how they develop themselves, how they become a better member of the society, and how do they produce in order to continue and make the society evolve through time. So, napaka-exciting pag-aralan ang social history because all the institutions are being studied here so that we can really understand how a society developed through time. And then we also have intellectual history. it looks into the history of ideas and theories, meaning to say, it studies on how ideas and theories came into existence from the time, okay, that we already have the study of history and up to the very moment. And historiography is one of the primary subfields in intellectual history, okay, wherein the development of schools and approaches are documented, particularly the documentation of ideas and theories. Yan. Another subfield is political history. It focuses on political ideas, political events, movements, parties, and leaders. Okay? And in this field of history, it is also fascinating to know about politics. Okay? About the political activities that happened during the earliest time and what were those political activities that were passed through time and we have until now. Okay? Like for example, in the Philippines, is the root of, let us say, political dynasty had already begun before, prior to the coming of the Spaniards and prior to the coming of the colonizers and until now? Or let us look into what we call the concept of graft and corruption. Okay? What was the history of graft and corruption? Or what we call also those activities that were not considered to be good practices in the political history of a certain society like the Philippines. Maganda ting pag-aralan to. Okay? I think we will have a discussion on that when you have politics and governance. Now, we also need to discuss the key concepts in history. First, we have the concept of significance. Now, finding the significance is a process of determining which part of a historical event has more value to be included in a narrative. I mean to say there must be a determination of historical events that is based, okay, on facts and has more value so that it can be included in narrative, okay, or in writing. Now, this process, of course, entails the critical thinking and selectivity of the historian. And one of the most models in identifying which event is considered significant was proposed by Lord Hartington. Okay? So, yan po si Lord Hartington. And Lord Hartington promoted 6-part criteria, okay, in order for a historian, okay, to identify the significant event that can be considered to be included in the writing or narrative of history. Okay, first, the people thought that the event was important during that time. Second is the event affected a lot of people. It led also to the other important events. And then it still affects attitudes. Okay? And it affected people for a long time. And it affected not only for a long time, but it affected the people deeply. Yan. So yun yung 6-part model in order to really find what part of history is significant to be put into writing. Do you think this pandemic is a historical event later on that must have to be included in writing or in narratives or in books? Okay? You must have to look into the proposal or model of Lord Hartington. Another concept in history is continuity and change. Now, historians have the goal of examining the shifts, the changes, and the transitions of institutions in the society, the actors also, the landscapes, and the phenomena that happen over time. So through the chronological method, historians trace the changes that transpire in societies and in a larger extent to the world. Okay? Yan. And historians aspire to understand the elements in human life and in the environment wherein humans live, okay, that persisted or are continuing through time. So there must be a continuity and change, okay, that may happen in the society, and that historians can easily trace those changes that transpired in the societies during the past and until now, or up to now. Another concept in history and considered to be a common theme in historical analysis is that of cause and effect, because it is through this paradigm that historians inquire on the factors that led to the events in history. Okay? And historians also analyze how these historical events shape the lives of the people and the communities. And such analysis allows historians then to draw themes that may be applicable to current events in human populations. Like for example, in the Philippines, okay, what was the cause and the effect of the EDSA revolution? Okay? And are the effects still applicable today? Okay? So we can see that by looking into the cause and effect as key concept in history. Another key concept, okay, is perspective. As history primarily based on written records or oral traditions made by different people in different eras and cultures, the reconstruction of the events requires historians to adopt analytical lenses or perspective. And there are varying perspectives used in historical analysis and reconstruction. And these perspectives are very important in order for the historian to really come out with a valid, accurate, okay, and applicable perspectives that can be used again by other historians that will come, okay, in the coming generations. Yan. So napakahalagang pagkakaroon din ng perspective in the study of history. Let us also be aware of the current applications of history. First, we have museum studies. This field, also called museology, studies how museums develop through time and their current role in the society as a depository of evidence of world history. Okay? Yan. Now, part of museum studies is the analysis of the motivations for the creation of themes in museum display. So, hindi lang pala about mga artifacts that can be found in the museum when we talk about museum studies, but also the motivations of those who are doing this kind of application in the creation of themes in museum displays. Okay? And I hope you already visited a museum and you become aware of the things that you've seen in that museum and relate it to the life of the people then and now. Okay? Another current applications of history is historic preservation. And the preservation of artifacts and fossils for the use of future generation is one of the concerns of applied historians who utilize historical knowledge and method, okay, in providing context to social issues for their resolutions. And this is done through what we call cultural and heritage conservation studies, which are often related to the field of historic preservation. Because through this discipline, artifacts, fossils, and places are conserved using methods such as reconstruction, preservation, and maintenance. And one of the examples of historic preservation is no other than the known Vegan City. Okay? And other parts of the Philippines wherein many heritages had been preserved, had been reconstructed, and maintained. Have you ever gone to Intramuros? Okay, magandang bisitahin yan. Okay, and you can see the preservation of buildings, okay, and artifacts and other historical sites, okay, and figures and materials or objects that can be found in Intramuros. So much for history. Now let us talk about the discipline of linguistics. First of all, let me start by saying that language allows us to express and understand each other's thoughts, ideas, and feelings. And this is very true. Okay? Because it is linguistics, true linguistics, according to Professor Robert Hall, okay, that language is the institution whereby humans communicate and interact with each other by means of habitually using oral auditory symbols. Okay? Ayan. Language is also strictly a human capacity which allows us to relate, okay, complex ideas. No other living things can really undergo this kind of development, okay, by using language, but only humans who has or who have the capacity that allows them to relate complex ideas. And it is commonplace and is used with little cognitive effort as evidenced by the rapid language acquisition of children. Okay? Because language, which involves one person's mouth and ears, is communicated through speech and functions through the use of linguistic signs or words that have no direct link to the natural world. Aside from that, linguistics is also interdisciplinary in nature, meaning it intersects humanities with the social sciences as it inquires on the basic element that allows societies to communicate ideas across time and space. And so, the term linguistic here was derived from the Latin word lingua, which refers to language. And since the late 1500s, individuals who study language have been called linguists. Now, let us talk more about linguistics. Linguistics, as a discipline, deals with three principal components. Okay? We have sound, structure, and meaning. Ayan. Now, sounds is divided into phonetics and phonology. Phonetics studies human speech sound, while phonology studies the principles governing sound systems of languages. And then, in structure, it is divided into morphology and syntax. Morphology studies language structure from its morphic units or root words. Okay? While syntax studies sentence structure such as grammar. And on meaning, it is divided into what we call semantics and pragmatics. Sorry, nawala yung pragmatics dyan. Okay? Semantics and pragmatics. Now, semantics studies the logic and meanings of words and phrases, while pragmatics studies the use of language and its effects on society. So remember that linguistics as a discipline deals with the three principal components: sound, structure, and meaning. Now, what are the fields that you know about linguistics? Historical linguistics is one of the fields of linguistics, otherwise known as diachronic linguistics, which studies how a particular language changes over time. And historical linguistics was one of the first subdisciplines of linguistics that was formed during the late 19th century. Okay? Yan. It studies how a particular language changes over time. Do you think our language in the Philippines had changed over time? And what were the changes that happened? Okay? It is through this field that we can know the studies of how a particular language had changed over time. And you have this, I think, sa subjects ninyo sa language area. Okay? Sa languages area. And I hope you are aware of this. Another field of linguistics is socio-linguistics. Yan. Now, it examines how language is used in relation to a people's socio-cultural environment. And in the study of the language, or examining how language is used in relation to a people's socio-cultural environment, it takes some considerations. Okay? First is the social background of the addresser and the addressee. Also, the relationship of the addresser and the addressee, and the context and manner through which the communication transpired. Yan. And due to the emphasis on how language is used, research in sociolinguistics can effectively be done by using sound or video recording or during everyday communication. So it is important pala to have an effective way of recording the sounds and communications of people in the society so that you can really examine how language is used in relation to people's interaction in the society. We also have developmental linguistics as field of linguistics, okay? And it analyzes the development of language acquisition, language retention, and language loss and bilingualism. In developmental linguistics, it studies the development of linguistic ability among children and the stages by which they gradually come to use the language. Developmental linguistics also heavily supports what we call the synchronic approach, wherein whatever the available data at that time period in order to learn the language, then the children can or may adapt to that data. Okay? The data that are available during that time period. Another field is neurolinguistics. Studies the physiological mechanisms by which the brain processes information to language. In here, it investigates how the human brain functions when used in communication and how it uses information to experiment and elaborate on linguistic and psycholinguistic theory. Yan. And apathology, which refers to the study of linguistic problems as a result of brain damage or brain imaging and computer modeling, are some of the techniques and instruments used in neurolinguistics. In here, in this field, you may also learn why some had developed easily and used the language easily compared to others. Maybe because it is related also to the development of the brain. That is why some are delayed and some are fast learner in using the language. After knowing and being aware of the fields in linguistics, it is also important for us to identify the key concepts related to linguistics. First, we have cohesion and coherence. Cohesion refers to linguistic links such as pronouns and adjectives which provide a recognizable structure. Coherence, on one hand, is the logic within discourse that takes into account our knowledge of words. These key concepts are very important, okay, for us as we construct or create our sentences and communicate them with other people. It is through coherence and cohesion that other people or the receiver of our message can really understand us. Okay? And on our part, as the giver of the message, can really construct a detailed and clear thoughts to convey the message to other people. Okay? So cohesion and coherence then talks about how do we really use the language and how knowledgeable we are to use correct terms, correct grammars in constructing our sentences and convey them, okay, with or to the people. Yan. Another concept of linguistics or in linguistics is critical discourse analysis, and it refers to the study of a text within its social context. And we mean by this that critical discourse analysis is a method that enables a vigorous assessment of what is meant when language is used to describe and explain. Meaning to say, the notion or critical discourse analysis rests on the notion that the way we use language is purposeful or there is a purpose why we use the language. Diba? Yan. Another concept is dialect. An identifiable regional or social variety of language. Now in here, a language communicated over an area can be spoken differently in some form or another in different places. And we call that as regional dialect. A language in a small area can even be spoken differently by different social groups, okay, within the community. And we call that a social dialect of sociolects. We also have functionalism, which is an approach to language structure that primarily focuses on the purpose in which language is used. Okay? And we also have the grapheme, a single character in a recognized writing system such as letters and punctuation marks, and lexicon, the total words available to a speaker or the vocabulary of language. So those are the key concepts that we must have to be aware of when we speak or when we study about the discipline of linguistics. Certainly, history is one discipline whose methods and approaches are highly used by practitioners in other disciplines in the social sciences. Not only in the social sciences, but also in natural sciences and humanities. And today, the value of history lies in its ability to provide context in the trajectory of events and personalities. Linguistics, too, enables humans to really communicate more efficiently so they can collaborate and survive in their environment. So, with this, thank you for listening. You are now ready to answer the activity given to you. Enjoy learning. Good luck and God bless. See you next video lecture.